Yeah, you staged it! You staged it! Staged it! You staged it! Freedom will be sanctioned! Child abuser! You staged this! You're a child abuser!
Now, dear Britons, you are facing a blow that cannot be overlooked. They are deceiving you, and this is not just rhetoric, it's a heartfelt outcry. Many of you have sensed that something sinister lurked behind the horrors that unfolded in Southport, yet the authorities, like timid puppies, have cowered behind legalities and bureaucratic red tape. Just yesterday, Keir Starmer, who was once a respected leader, confessed that he was aware of Axel Rudekabener's troubling past long before this shocking information came to light.
And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law to deal with it. On the second point, yes, of course I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information, any more than it was a journalist's personal decision not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out, to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve.
The moment Starmer began his speech, the atmosphere in the hall shifted dramatically. It felt as if the energy had been violently stripped away, leaving only an empty void behind. People started to fidget nervously in their seats, exchanging bewildered and shocked glances. Is this really happening? The reaction was so palpable that it was impossible to overlook. Disbelief, disappointment, and a rising sense of dissatisfaction filled the room like a brewing storm. How do you view this situation? The Prime Minister continues to intentionally mislead the British public to uphold his perspective, and this is utterly outrageous. His claims of being powerless come off as feeble attempts at self-justification. How is it that the Crown Prosecution Service and the police were aware of his manual and what he writes in his bedroom, yet failed to recognize the potential for something terrible to happen?
How many more children are going to our streets, Prime Minister? How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? We're going to do something. We're going to stand up for our children. Bye-bye. Got your photos. Off you go. Make a real change, Prime Minister. Make a real change! Our children! Go away!
I just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter was killed.
You're not wanted!
The person I've held as a child and he's
The authorities claim they knew nothing about Starmer, but that is a blatant lie. And it feels like a slap in the face. He was referred to the Extremism Prevention Program 3 times, and the police visited his home on multiple occasions. It's crucial to pinpoint exactly when Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper became aware of his troubled past and the fact that he had authored a manual himself. Let's be honest, he is responsible for this. It seems he has completely forgotten the fundamental rule of politics to understand his audience. In Southport, he couldn't help but miss the mark. Starmer arrived believing he was the main attraction, but he left looking more like the punchline of a bad joke, leaving behind a trail of confusion and disbelief.
Well, I think there are two separate and important issues there, Harry. The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualised violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat. It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place. And we have to recognise that here today, because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence, it's clearly intended to terrorise.
Starmer experienced a humiliating moment when his own supporters began to boo him. His recent speech, intended to inspire and unite the crowd, quickly devolved into a complete failure, igniting a wave of anger. What did he say that transformed cheers into mockery and discontent? Let's delve into it. Starmer was once a beacon of hope for the Labour Party, but now those glorious days feel like a distant memory fading into the past. He arrived in Southport, brimming with expectations for a warm reception as the leader of the Labour Party. Instead, he was met with a harsh reality he never anticipated. How painful it is to come to terms with the fact that hopes have turned into disappointment. Labour supporters are absolutely furious, and their anger is through the roof. They believe that Starmer has betrayed all the values the party stands for. Left-wing MPs are not just dissatisfied, they are enraged, accusing him of abandoning the traditional foreign policy of the Labour Party. This isn't a mere blunder, it's a full-blown disaster, a stark contrast to how previous party leaders have interacted with Trump. Jeremy Corbyn refused to attend a state banquet with Trump, Sadiq Khan openly condemned the ban on Muslims, and even Tony Blair, despite his differences, maintained a more measured approach. But Starmer, he actually welcomes Trump with open arms. Labour has always positioned itself as a party opposed to figures like Trump. Now, those who once placed their trust in them feel utterly betrayed and deceived. Starmer, once viewed as the savior of the Labour Party, is now facing a full-scale revolt. And it's not just the leftists who have turned against him. Centrists are also beginning to abandon their posts, further complicating the situation. MPs are sharpening their knives, and rumors are swirling that he will have to fight for his leadership. Meanwhile, the polls are plummeting, and the Labour Party's approval rating is in free fall. Even in its traditional strongholds, voters are starting to drift away, leaving behind nothing but disappointment and discontent. This is a genuine catastrophe for a party that was once a beacon of hope for so many.
Yeah, come on in here, Mama.
They've been on the front line, keeping people alive. So I really don't need lectures from you about this pandemic.
You've got one.
Can we come in? Is that okay? During his speech in Southport, Starmer was interrupted 5 times while discussing the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. This wasn't just pushback, it was a full-blown rebellion. And each time, the shock on his face was unmistakable. He genuinely couldn't grasp why his own supporters were turning against him. But this situation isn't solely about Starmer. The Labour Party as a whole is slowly distancing itself from its troubled past, and that doesn't bode well for the future. The party is actively criticizing Starmer and the leadership on social media. And this isn't just background noise, it could lead to real, disastrous consequences in the upcoming election. Polling stations are still in place, but Labour, once taken for granted, is gradually fading away. If you're a determined individual, why not join a party that is urging you to step back from one of the biggest political battles of the decade? See you later.